Alright, welcome to my mid-residency senior capstone project proposal. My name's Solomon Rios. I couldn't get my camera working this time. My computer's a little old and the Zoom video record feature just kind of wasn't working, but hopefully you can hear that I'm wearing a suit. Maybe not. But anyways, I'm proposing a study of religion in science fiction and fantasy, particularly with an emphasis on religion's beginnings and how those are kind of talked about and represented in specifically science fiction and fantasy novels primarily. So I think, it's kind of undeniable that there is a long and rich tradition of religious storytelling, from religious texts to mythology and even stories passed down from generations in different cultures and societies that have religious themes and kind of ideologies attached to them. And fiction that deals with religion and, fiction itself is kind of at the intersection of society, culture, history, psychology, to name just a few. And in this way, religion and storytelling or fiction go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And when they work together, I think can contemplate really massive questions like what is the nature of humanity, belief, kind of our capacity to feel and understand things, and specifically, I think sci-fi and fantasy looks at this question a lot. Why and how religion manifests itself in different cultures and situations. So my goal with that in mind is to review a range of fiction across time, mostly looking at the past century, I'd say, of fantasy and sci-fi, and mostly adult fiction, though I may look at some YA fiction, just not a lot, specifically that deals with the development or evolution or even creation of different religions within these fictional worlds, whether they're permutations of real-world religions or religions kind of created from the ground up for the purpose of a specific piece of fiction. I'll be kind of looking at both, as I think both have something really interesting to offer. And through my research, I'll be looking at real-world kind of historical parallels to a lot of these religions in the literature. So for me, I think what draws me to both literature and religious studies, which is what most of my coursework has been in during my time at UCSB, is that both are kind of drawn to this concept of searching and of kind of creating something bigger as a society or as a mass of people. Literature kind of writes from the past and to the future in an ever-evolving compilation or intertextual kind of story or narrative, and it splinters off in lots of interesting ways. And I think religion does a lot of the same things with the idea of passing down knowledge and kind of preserving convention, but ultimately both are subject to change. And so out of that, a few of my initial questions are, what makes religion so fascinating to study for me and for others, because obviously a lot of authors have found it an interesting topic. Why does religion work so well in fiction? If you're a fan at all of the fantasy genre, every time you pick up a book, you're probably going to get another creation myth. But what is so fascinating about that, and why has that happened so often? I think there is definitely something there, and the two really go hand in hand. Not that you can't have one without the other, but there definitely is a symbiotic relationship there. And then finally, what makes religious fiction relatable or retellable, what makes it good. I'll be looking at, hopefully, fingers crossed, good fiction, but that remains to be seen, I suppose. So for my creative work, the ultimate goal, and really why I want to do this, is to write a novella, maybe stretch it into a novel, but just for the purpose of my sanity and time with the senior capstone. The goal is one novella that will hopefully be part of a series. But the initial one will just be looking at the inception or the beginnings of a belief system in a fantasy world. And it'll be based on, of course, my research to kind of tell it in a subversive and interesting way. I'll be looking to fill in gaps that I find in the literature of, representation and different kinds of worship, and ways to tell the story that aren't too formulaic, hopefully. And just one of the ways off the top of my head that I'm planning to do that is just not have a prophecy or a savior character, just because I find that really played out and just not how it works in the real world. Which is fine, of course, it's fantasy and science fiction, but I'm going to be looking at religion from a more humanist, everyday perspective, of course with a grand scope going on in the background. And then eventually, and we'll see how much I can get done, probably not by my senior capstone, but maybe in the years after, creating a series where eventually this religion that I've shown the beginnings of, fast forward hundreds or thousands of years later, and it's become an ancient or old tradition, and looking at its kind of where it stands in a more contemporary society, what the changes are, what the conflicts are, and the ideological shifts, and maybe new texts that have evolved with it. And then finally, I want to, just to appeal to the sci-fi geek part of me, create a kind of post-religious society where this culture has, maybe left the planet or is living in some future where a new innovation or disaster has occurred that's really changed the religion or caused a resurgence. And in that way, it will be post-religious. And, maybe I'll chronicle, like, the end or fall of a religion, but maybe I'll also chronicle just kind of how it cocoons itself and, breaks free as something completely new. I'm not sure, but I definitely envision this as a series. I'd like to outline it by the end of senior year